Our white enemies aren't going to give up on taking the major cities back from us. Some of you think when they retreated to the suburbs, they were running away. Not at all. It was merely a strategic fallback, a safe place where they could plan their reconquest of the inner city. Now, some of you think because Detroit has an 85% black population and Newark a 55% black population and New Orleans a 68% black population, that the whites will simply fume and rage but ultimately accept that blacks have them woefully outnumbered, and that is that. But have they left your city alone? Or are they still trying to use gentrification to expel the blacks from the city, the same way they did in Miami? Right now, the good white folks in Wayne County are letting the blacks stew in their own juices. The whites have Detroit surrounded, not like a group of neighbors, but like an army waiting for the order to invade. This is ethnic cleansing, American style, but it's only a taste of what Detroit is in for if they don't make some rapid changes. Make no mistake, the whites are planning to retake Detroit the same way they've begun the reconquest of New Orleans, Newark, Baltimore, Gary, Indiana, and anywhere else where blacks have set up shop. And when they do retake it, they intend to leave the blacks broke, homeless, and destitute. Kind of like they did in another major black city. And what are the black leaders of Detroit doing while all this is going on? Are they improving the conditions of Detroit's residents so they can stand on their own 2 feet and resist the economic war that's coming? Or are they preoccupied with something else? Folks, we are all Detroiters now. That means we are all in trouble, and unless we get serious about what we want, unless you lay out an agenda in no uncertain terms at the grassroots, one that white people didn't create or control, then we are all going to go the way of the Motor City.
I made that video 4 years ago. Well, it's 2013, and as I told you, the racists have taken Detroit, lock, stock, and barrel, and they didn't even bother to wait until the blacks had left. The whites realized that they already had a statewide majority, so they used that to implement a blatantly fascist takeover of the cities they were unable to win in an election. And it's neither an accident nor a surprise that the only cities that are being taken over by the state are the black ones. I saw 13 years ago that the Republicans had stopped trying to actually win elections. They realized America was leaving them behind, so they started looking for ways to seize office without having to get 50.1% of the vote. Next thing we know, the Supreme Court is deciding who's president, and right-wing business interests are overthrowing California's governor with a recall election. Because in a recall election, you don't have to get 50.1% of the vote. All you have to get is a numerical plurality. The problem was that even these extreme and blatantly unconstitutional schemes didn't solve the Republicans' main problem, that there simply aren't enough white males left for them to win national office anymore, and increasingly not enough left for them to win state office either. So now they're attempting to turn every Republican state into its own little banana republic, or should I say its own little apartheid, and Detroit was to be their test case. Now you understand why the concept of so-called states' rights has become so precious to them. Now you understand why they keep saying that, as they see it, the individual states are countries unto themselves, able to enact laws independent of the federal government or even the Constitution. In Michigan, states' rights has taken the form of the state initiating a hostile takeover of specifically targeted cities. Now the right-wingers will try to say the emergency manager was the will of the people, but that's a lie. Because when the Republicans put the idea of an emergency manager on the state ballot, the people of Michigan voted it down. That's right. The people of Michigan voted against the plan to have so-called emergency managers. Everyone could see that this was a poorly disguised grab for power by the Republicans, who were obviously trying to manufacture a so-called law to take over cities they couldn't win in an election. But the Republican governor, supported by his Republican legislature, totally trampled the will of the people, implementing a set of laws which replicated the emergency manager scheme that the voters had rejected. Both I and Black Authority told you that Detroit was the target of this law. For years we had given you the play-by-play chronicling how white supremacy was creeping up on the Motor City to gobble it whole. Having failed to take the power of the vote from black people, the Republicans decided to take the political power from the black people's elected officials. The people of Detroit can still vote, but now it's their representatives who are under state-sanctioned house arrest. They cannot enact any regulations, carry out any city functions, can't enter into any contracts, or even hold a city council meeting for that matter. And once the state has taken a city hostage, there's no way to force them out. They don't have to relinquish control of the city until they get ready to, which won't be until after they've stripped it of all civil rights, all economic protections, and all opportunities for non-whites. As I said years ago, this is ethnic cleansing, American style. They have nullified the citizens' vote while still taking those same citizens' tax money and what was left of their future. This is an entirely new form of white supremacy on the march. New, but not surprising. The intelligent among us saw this coming years ago. A lot of black people didn't want to believe white people would go this far, but some of us, who are willing and able to see the world the way it truly is, understood long ago that there's nothing you can put past these people. Even if the people of Detroit tried, they can't put pressure on the Republican politicians at the state level because they have redrawn the district lines in such a way as to ensure that no matter how numerous the black vote is, it will always be corralled into a few minor districts. This way black representation can be made artificially lower than it really is. Welcome to American apartheid. But Detroit was only the beginning. It's no coincidence that during his regime, W. began front-loading the Supreme Court with as many right-wing zealots as he could. After all, it was the Supreme Court that handed him a presidency that he didn't actually win. The unreconstructed Confederates on the Supreme Court began celebrating months ago how they were going to take down the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Antonin Scalia, sounding like the racist punk he's always been, issued statements that sounded like something Karl Rove would say. He boldly proclaimed that it was his job to enforce political agendas from the bench. And the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who in the 1980s, as a member of the Reagan administration, tried to eliminate the Voting Rights Act, using the same arguments that he used 30 years ago, that the times had changed. Well, the times may change, but these people don't. The lie that Chief Justice Roberts tried to use in 2013 was that the South was no more racist than the North. This is the old "we're all a little bit racist" meme. Roberts also went on to defend his make-believe rationale by saying Massachusetts had a worse record on minority voting than Mississippi. Well, Massachusetts Secretary of State William F. Galvin refuted that and used Roberts' own data to do it. So we see that this isn't about the facts or even reality. It's about the sick power desires of white supremacy. John Roberts had no legal justification for his ruling. He just made it up as he went along, creating totally fictitious terms that have no meaning in order to justify an action that had no legality. And we know that this was a concerted effort because within moments of the Supreme Court having crippled the Voting Rights Act, we saw the GOP-controlled state legislatures immediately take full advantage of the fact that there is now no federal oversight of how they draw the voting districts. Think about that. These same state legislatures take months, if not years, to argue over economic measures or vote for educational or health care reform. Virtually all the state legislatures have been in perpetual gridlock for years now. But when it came time to reintroduce 21st century Jim Crow, it took them less than 2 hours to bring out some spanking new laws. That lets you know what the Republican politicians consider to be their top priority.